Testing, testing. Once again, I'm back here, Michael Wickerson at Wickerson Studios, and I'm digging deeper into Revit 2021. And actually, I've gone through all of the architecture, structure, steel, precast systems. I've jumped into as much as I think I can learn in most of these situations. I've learned how to set planes and start to build things. I'm feeling pretty confident with it. I definitely know how to go into the user interface and deal with the browsers and the properties, so feeling pretty good about that. So what I'm doing is nothing fancy at all, but I am continuing with this GHPYTHON Chinese text and translating their script. This is a very simple script that takes a surface and takes a surface domain, 0, 1 in the UV direction, and finds the average of it, or the medium of it, as you find the DU and dividing it in the U direction and the V direction. What I'm setting up there is sphere list at the beginning, so I can set spheres at every point, and I'm actually dealing with curvature. So what I did in this node, and this script is after it's written out, I do recommend getting the text. You're basically appending a sphere list. I was going to bring in a parameter to change the minimum curvature less than 0.002, or I left that, and I decided instead I'd bring in this curve number. So that's what I've been playing with. And the curve number is basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, the curvature of the curve, and that will dictate where the spheres actually generate. I have a huge scale on it. I'm just going to close this because it's really not about keeping these scripts, just taking those scripts and showing you how to copy a script from a book. It's something different. The sphere is made here. The surface is made here, as you can see. The three things here are actually made looking at the east view and generating an extra level plan. So I'm actually getting a little bit into having fun with what this means to actually walk myself through the different views in the browser properties, I think it's called, or browser, what is it called? Let me just check it out. User interface, architecture, modify, I think it's under modify. No, where is it? View, user interface. Yeah, it's the project browser. So when I bring in the project browser, I can go through and I can grab this for the north face and grab it from the south face. They're really like this. I'm really getting into wanting to see things this way related to a real floor plan, which I actually brought in. So the 3D floors are actually Revit generated floors. And what I did with that was I took those out and used very simple nodes, Revit primitives here, that will bring in a Revit, let me grab my bifocals, get the right name of it, bring in a graphic element for Revit. And that's exactly what I did. So there's the graphic elements from Revit, the top one, third floor, second floor, and first floor. And even though they're there, they're only reference for me to build a surface, which I did on here. And the surface I then generated and I rebuilt, and I pulled and pushed it using its control points in all different directions, and I can move that. But it's related, and it's in scale to those Revit floors that I generated. So I'm very happy with that. And I'm going to get rid of that project browser. Oh my gosh, I keep forgetting the name of it. Browser, whatever. There's a properties one and there's a browser one. And so I can get in here and I can scoot around and shift and use my right mouse key to see everything I want in there in Revit, and that's pretty fun. But I also can set it up so it generates differently, and as you can see, it still is controlled by the GHPYTHON script that is happening. Let me get rid of this Rhino form. That every time I move it, these three, like I said, those three, I haven't found a way to actually pull the graphic elements into Rhino and then treat them like breps. So that's what's bothering me, is every time I'll dig into more of what Scott Davidson's doing, but basically this outputs things like, it just takes a while to run anything. Every time you touch something, something has to run the script again. You're getting these Revit floors generic 12-inch, so it's not treated like a brep. And even though I can export Revit objects into Rhino to then hopefully work with, I've not really got the direct link figured out yet. I'm going to keep working on that. But certainly the surface was related to that size and scale, and I wanted to move through the 3 floors in the 10-foot spacing here and 20-foot spacing between the first and second floor and second and third floor. And then I have a divide on here that I set by 10 by 10, so I'm really popping these spheres in here. And as you saw with the script earlier, I brought in the curve num right here. That would be something that I could actually find the minimum chord is equal to the curvature at that point, which would be an integer from 0 if the curvature was 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you'll see what happens as it runs the script as I go through and change that curvature, which can be nice. It's running it again, and it generates that surface afterwards, which actually generates, doesn't generate a surface, treats all those surfaces, treats those spheres like surfaces. And there it is running again at 4. I think that's pretty nice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that back down, the curvature down to 3, and that will change that script again. And then you're going to end up with equal spheres running all over the surface. And of course, it has to catch up in Revit and run again. And if you're thinking of programs like this, and I say programming architecture and programming assignments, I'm more thrilled by this entire animation and complexities of this. And I'm pretty sure it's a conceptual game for me, kind of what art has always been. And I like the curvature too, because that starts to generate a pretty cool shape of running those spheres through in a fairly interesting pattern. Keep in mind that this is completely, as it's trying to run through Revit, and I'm messing with it. I'll pull it out here and give it a second, and then I'll put back on my, hang on a second, I don't like that. Yeah, I just want to have my control points set up so I can get at them. And I'll put on my control points, and then even then I can take these control points and start to change the curvature back down, and you'll see it has to move that original form. The curvature becomes a lot less. The spheres have to run again in Rhino at a curvature 2, and there you go. Now that's not as exciting as what I had, because I actually had this pushing up through the roof, which I actually really like that one a little better. I tap Alt to duplicate. But this is where I'm playing. GHPYTHON nodes running very simple scripts under the Chinese text. Try not to highlight those and just show even though I did intend to translate a lot of those Rhino script syntax into Rhino common namespaces, I just find that that's breaking things down a little too far to where I want to go. So as I bring this in, the script is actually quite manageable. It plays off basically the same set, and at some point I can still do things with points in this list. So I could make a point list, let's just make a points list equal to an empty list, and maybe I'll get around to appending a points list with points, and that would allow me to output the points. And in doing so, actually I think I could just output points from here, but I want a list of those points. I could pull that back in over here and generate those point lists out. And from that data, I could go post Grasshopper GHPython node and create other geometries. So if you're into this, if you kind of like having these control panels playing off for you, you've got as many windows open. Obviously, for these videos, I have to pack it down into one little Alienware's computer screen, laptop screen. But I really do run this with multiple windows open as I'm kind of playing around with it. And even though these are just sphere surfaces on here, you can imagine if you start, or if I could figure out a way to import different Rhino primitives and really start using this. And there's another tool in here that I'm starting to take an interest in using. I downloaded it. It's the Geometry Gym. And this is starting to throw a bunch of these IFCs, industrial something classes, this is getting pretty deep to what was happening before. I guess Rhino Revit had gone into Rhino 2021. But I basically, between that and what's available there to what you can do things with, I did download in Rhino 6 Geometry Gym as a plugin for Grasshopper. So that comes up there, which is pretty interesting. However, it doesn't come up in this, obviously, because I think it's nested into the Revit. That's a lot of stuff that I'm trying to wrap my head around all at the same time. I'm keeping the scripts fairly simple. I'm going to go on to dealing with ISO curves and trimming surfaces and trim boxes, and we're going to start doing some, we're going to start weaving some curves on surfaces. And these scripts are going to get more and more intricate, and they're going to use a little bit of math, a little bit of trig that I love so well, and I think there's going to be some very interesting surfaces by the time I end with chapter 1 of this text and move on to chapter 2, which is dealing with shells, and then it just gets more and more complex. I can only imagine as I move through the GHPython text and am learning Revit from all the online tutorials and building some simple sets and finding the power of being able to come in here and, of course, now grab your shots or whatever you want, which is just amazing to me. And these aren't even baked. I haven't even done anything to even bake these into Rhino. If I did that and was happy with the system and threw them all in, now I've got all these wonderful forms that have decided to be permanent. They should be actually coming in as objects into Revit at the same time, but that's taken a little bit of time to bake all those forms I think it's not. There we go. And now we have something in Rhino that's pretty darn interesting, even if I was to leave the Grasshopper window now and see what I've actually generated. That then obviously brought in through other means is starting to create some pretty interesting spaces. And I do want to take that off so I can see everything the green selected. At this point, if I do like my model, I usually go into my file, property, I think it's preferences, yeah, and turn this into a color that's actually makes me a little more happy to be selecting it. And there we go. And I'll just throw this one into a little more orange. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. A little grotesque. Just pull it into yellow maybe. So there we go. You're playing around with some things that are becoming some very cool geometries in Rhino, generated by a simple GHPYTHON script, and with a little bit of Python skills, nothing too fancy at all. Certainly no functions or classes tucked in there that on my own accord, but they're being used from the Rhino script syntax, and I'm ending up with things that I would never be generating in Rhino, in Revit, and certainly not as many possibilities through it all. So I hope you find that interesting. 11 minutes. I'm going to keep digging. If I wasn't so darn busy at school, I think I'd be doing even more of this, but hopefully I can inspire some interest of students wanting to be very playful with their models and taking that into the real world, which is the whole intention of this, and go back to some interest I probably could have had 2.5 decades ago in architecture coming out of math and computers. Thanks for watching. Michael Wickerson here, Wickerson Studios.